Before we get into trivia, it's time to throw it over to Mikey P with your Rangers Ed 150, the fastest 150 seconds in the National Hockey Podcast League.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Rangers Ed 150, the fastest 150 seconds in the National Hockey Podcast League. I'm your host, Dr. Pierzak, and we are back after the holidays, and the show is back in full swing. We had a great Winter Classic on Monday with Boston taking down Pittsburgh 2-1 on the back of 2 goals from Jake DeBrusk in the third period. And it was also announced that Vegas will be taking on the Seattle Kraken in the 2024 Winter Classic. Sticking with Vegas out west in the Pacific Division, the Golden Knights are still in that number 1 spot and have put up 2 wins and 2 losses on the board since Christmas. They dropped a couple divisional tilts to the Kings and Ducks immediately after Christmas and have since taken 2 from the Central Division, 1 from the Avs and 1 from the Preds. Vegas currently has their 3 of their big guns on IR, and Jack Eichel, Shea Theodore, and Jonathan Marchessault. So as the season moves forward, keep in mind that this team has been quite successful despite having significant pieces on IR for extended duration. The Kings are still holding on to that number 2 spot, but this team is too reliant on their offense to win games. LA is 6th in the league in goals scored, but are 5th worst in goals against, having surrendered 137. So if this team's going to make a run going forward, they need to tighten it up on the defensive end. Finally, the Flames have crept up into 3rd place, moving the Kraken down to that 4 spot. The Flames finally seem to be getting it together over the last couple weeks and have put up a 2-1 record since Christmas with wins over Seattle and Vancouver and a loss to the Oilers. Moving on to the Central, right now this division is all about Dallas, Winnipeg, and Minnesota. Dallas continues to play as they've been all season, so not much to go into there. But Winnipeg has stumbled a bit recently, winning only 2 of their last 5, but still sitting in that number 2 spot. The Minnesota Wild have finally found their rhythm with only 2 losses through their last 10, coming to San Jose and Winnipeg. Significant news out of St. Louis with Ryan O'Reilly out 4 to 6 weeks with a broken foot, Vladdy Tarasenko out 4 weeks with a hand injury, and Torrey Krug on long-term injured reserve to be reevaluated in 6 weeks. Unlikely this team's going to make a real push without those 3 players, so watch out for them at the trade deadline because they will likely have significant pieces that playoff-bound teams are very interested in. Guys like Colton Parayko, Justin Falk, Nick Leddy, Braden Shen, and Brandon Saad are great trade pieces for playoff-bound teams. Moving on to the East in the Atlantic Division, Boston is still holding on to that number 1 spot with 0 regulation losses in their last 10 and still undefeated in regulation at TD Garden. The Leafs are also on top of their game, only dropping 1 out of their last 5 to the Yotes, and have finally got Morgan Rielly back after an MCL strain in early December, so watch out for them now that they have all their big boys back in the lineup. The Bolts are 3rd in the division, and since the return of Anthony Cirelli, have put up a 9-3 record, moving Detroit out of that top 3. The last team to mention in the Atlantic is the Buffalo Sabres. This team has been adding tons of young talent over the last 3 to 4 years, and it seems that it's finally coming to fruition for them, barring some defensive mishaps. Rasmus Dahlin is having a career year, sitting at 3rd in the league in defensive points with 38. Tage Thompson is tied for 6th in the league in points, 2nd in the league in goals, and as a team, they are tied for 2nd in the league in goals scored with 137, 1 behind the Boston Bruins, but are leading the league in goals per game played with 3.91. This isn't a team that's going to win a cup yet. They don't have the defensive depth or the goaltending to make a deep run down the stretch, but Buffalo could really stir the pot as the playoffs approach and supplant a team like the Pens, Rangers, or Capitals from a wild card spot. Finally, in the Metro Division, the Carolina Hurricanes are the hottest team in the show right now, without question. They've overtaken the Devils for first place and have widened the gap between themselves and the second-place Devils to 7 points. Canes are riding an 11-game win streak and handed the Devils their 10th loss on Monday night in a shootout. Since the start of December, the Devils have done a complete 180 and are looking like the Devils we've seen for the last 5 years or so. They're now 4-10 since December 1st and have surrendered 4 or more goals in all but 3 of their games through that span. The Caps, on the other hand, have turned it around and out of nowhere after an abysmal start to the season, despite Backstrom, Hagelin, Wilson, Carlson, all remaining on long-term injured reserve. However, Oshie is returning this week, I believe. The Caps are 11-2 through their last 13 games, and after looking like they may not even make the playoffs a few weeks ago, they now look like they could actually contend for a Stanley Cup. We got some exciting hockey coming up this week, folks, so stay tuned for more updates next week. This has been your 150.